welcome to another episode of First Levels. In this episode, we will have three very old games from the Atari VCS, or the Atari 2600 as it's more commonly known. The first game we're looking at here is Mario Brothers. Whoa, what are you talking about? Mario? This does not look like Mario. Why? Because most people think of Mario, they think of Super Mario Brothers, the side-scrolling platformer that appeared on the NES, or the games that came out after that. This is in fact a port of the first Mario game that came out, which was actually the second game that Mario was featured in. The first was Donkey Kong. This one may look a little familiar to you if either you've played this game before, obviously, or if you are a big fan of Mario 3, Super Mario Bros. 3 for the NES, which had a mini-game like this, sort of a battle mode where one person plays as Mario, the other plays as Luigi, and you run around in an environment like this trying to score points. In that sense, this is a terrible port of that. I believe that may have been an arcade game. But this is, well, it kind of shows off the weaknesses of the old Atari 2600. And it's obvious because the Atari 2600, as I understand it, was originally built with the idea of being a very purpose-built piece of hardware designed to play the games Pong, and I think the other one was Combat. As a result of that, it was very limited. But that's the end of the first level. Moving on to Pac-Man, 1981 Atari. This was a Namco game, of a port of an arcade game, which, if you played the arcade game or any other version of this game, you will notice that this is a very inferior port. The sound effects look terrible. Pac-Man sort of only moves side to side. The ghosts are flickering a lot. It looks bad. It sounds worse. It is a terrible port of the game. Now, there's a little bit of a backstory, as I understand it, for the reason why that this game looks so bad. And the reason was, originally, it was this version of the game was done as a sort of a side project by one of the programmers at Namco with the idea of just saying, like, oh, you know, is it possible to do Pac-Man on the Atari VCS? And there was actually a question of that, if it was possible, because the Atari was a piece of garbage, even in its own time. There was actually a question of whether the machine was capable of doing a simple game like this. So one of the developers sat down and hammered out a very simple version of the game. Now, when they showed that to the boss at the company, they said, oh, you got it up and running. Go ahead and publish this. That's the reason why the Atari has the crappiest version of Pac-Man ever produced. Let's see if we can get the last one, and that's the end of the level. And we're moving on to Pitfall. This is probably the first side-scrolling adventure game ever, platformer kind of. And well, this really does kind of push the Atari to its limits, as pathetic as that sounds by looking at this. Yeah, that's supposed to be a Tarzan yell, but it doesn't really come across. Now, I spent countless hours or minutes or something like that playing this game when I was a kid, trying to get through it, and it is quite difficult because, well, games back then were. They all were. All of them. There we go. Made it over the alligators. Watch the rolling logs. And this is really just simple. It just goes screen to screen to screen, so there really isn't a first level that I can really reach the end of. So I'm going to do this until I die. But, you know, you could see why at the time this would have been the most popular game for the system. Definitely better than, say, E.T. And believe it or not, it did take a whole lot of development and design and engineering in order to produce a game that looks like this or plays like this. And, shit. Oh well, I'm dead, so it's the end of the episode.